Good evening, welcome to MOTS presents MOTS Ado About Nothing.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
Where we apply the revolutionary MOTS scale to classic and contemporary literature.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
This podcast contains mature content, spoilers, language. You have been warned. Hi, and welcome back to MOTS Ado About Nothing. I'm here with Scott Thilla.
Hello.
Beth Morgan.
Hello.
And Chris Morgan.
Good evening.
I'm Jonathan Manzer, and we're going to be discussing Repent, Harlequin, said the Ticktockman. All right, so...
By Harlan Ellison.
Yes, by Harlan Ellison. Thank you very much, Scott. I forgot that. Anyway, Beth, would you like to start with this, or who would like to do the synopsis of it first?
I'll do it because I chose this one for this group of MOTS Ado About Nothing. It's the personification of the clockwork nature of what society may become. Slaves to time. And exploring that aspect.
So, Beth, would you like to start by discussing the introduction?
Discussing, I can give it my rating, which is a 1, because it did hook me. I wasn't sure what was going on at first. It took me a little bit of time, but I wanted to know what was going on, but I wasn't sure what was happening. So
they don't give you much information to set up.
I don't feel like I can explain what was going on in any coherent way. But I wanted to know enough that I was like, all right, what is going on? I'm interested. This is kind of crazy and also really cool. So it hooked me. I don't necessarily think I can take the very beginning and tell you what it meant.
Fair enough. Well, the question is, were you arrested by it?
And I was, so yes.
Well, it started off with a quotation by...
Thoreau.
Yes. And I always like when I think it's an effective use of the of quotations. But to be fair, this is the first time I ever read the work. And prior to this, I had found my copy of A Light in the Attic by Shel Silverstein. And included in that was an audio of him doing some of his poetry. It was very beat style. So I felt that this, Repent Harlequin, said the Ticktockman, was very kind of almost like poetic, kind of beat style poetry.
That. I'll speak
so
more.
The narration in my head was Shel Silverstein, which might have provided
an extra layer that may not have existed originally,
exactly.
But sure.
And I actually tried looking for a audio copy of Ellison reading this work to see if it was meant to be read in that way. And I couldn't, but nonetheless, it was. And it was very effective in that manner. So not only was I hooked, but I had Shel Silverstein carrying me the entire way through this work. So I have to give it a 1, but maybe more towards Shel than it is to
more credit
Ellison.
for him.
Right. So anyway, Chris?
I'm going to give it a 1 as well. Both this and Nightfall. Didn't Nightfall have a quote too at the beginning?
I think it did have a quick quote.
But anyway...
Yes.
I do enjoy that because it, in both cases it did set the tone. But I was very taken with like the first line where basically he's now is the heart of it, now in the middle, begin in the middle. But I quickly got I didn't get right away, Scott, until you talked about the slaves of time. But I really got the message of a future dystopia.
Yes.
And any future dystopia always brings me back to Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut, and because I think it was the first dystopian piece of work I've read. So that the first paragraph had that air to it, really hooked me.
Scott?
Fair enough. Well, of course, I'll be somewhat biased, but again, trying to do it objectively, narratively, as you said, like opening with a quote, when done well, is probably going to be effective, and it's a Thoreau quote, and it's about man versus the nature of as society develops, industrialized, becoming slaves. Instead of that serving man now serves it, and that I think is a major theme, which we'll get into soon. But regardless, and here's the line you want, Chris. I'll read it to you guys. After the quote, the opening lines are, "That is the heart of it. Now begin in the middle. and later learn the beginning. The end will take care of itself. That's very, as to your point, that's quite poetic. It's almost a Silverstein kind of line, even without hearing his narration read it to you. But yeah, so I'm of course going to give it a 1. It wasn't a arresting opening, and as Beth sort of will explore later a bit, but as she just said, it's not clear what's happening at first, but it's certainly intriguing.
Yeah,
So,
it kind of just dumps you in there, which is what it's trying to do.
begin in the middle, of
It's
course.
effective, right? Exactly. So
Agreed.
not understanding exactly what you're in the middle of is not a weakness. It's just
Right. It's in medias res, but
yeah.
therefore, good.
No, I was going to say that's
and
what we're talking about.
It's that in a world that you're not familiar with. So it's not just like you're in the middle of something that you understand. It's you're in the middle of something completely new.
I was going to...
It's a dystopia, as you said as well. But
but
that's unclear a bit at first. But
as Roland D. Morris said about one of his works, okay, we're starting off in the middle of something, wake up, or catch up, we're here. And that's the sense I got from it as well. Yeah, I agree.
All right, we're going to be on to was it totally consistent? And I will begin. This is a shorter work. So
the shortest of the works were on the block of stories you read, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel because by the very nature of that, you're dealing with, it can keep its tone a lot easier than a larger work. And it was Shel Silverstein carrying me through. It never lost that sense of like power to it, that sense of poetic, its poetic nature. And I kept imagining like bongo drums playing in the background while I was listening to this, as someone spouting off rhyme about why the man is terrible and we should be free and enjoy ourselves. And that carried, that spirit carried me from the very beginning to the very end. And from that, I have to give it definitely a 1. Chris?
I'm definitely giving it a 1 as well. And this is going to be kind of a 2-layered reason. Number 1, let me start off by saying I'm going to read it once again, thinking about the Slaves of Time analogy, because I
blowing your mind all day, every day.
Yeah, well, I took it literally as a dystopian society, and I was thinking about it. It's both, of course. I'll speak more. Why I keep coming back to Harrison Bergeron and things like,
just real quickly to that point, in the introduction, in the copy I have, they name check that story outright.
Do they really?
Yes.
Okay, because in things like this, like Logan's Run, or to a degree, believe it or not, the Hunger Games, because when I first read the Hunger Games, I immediately thought of Harrison Bergeron, and in any one of these dystopian societies where you have a governance, like an old powerful government, 1984, same thing. You have something that equalizes the mass populace. Now the people at the top, and in this situation, the Ticktockman, the people in charge don't live by the same rule as the mass populace, but you need an equalizer. In each story, there is an equalizing component, and this I took it as time. So, tonally, that theme went through it, and then the Harlequin, his big crime is he disrupts time, and that's showing that rebellious nature. So tonally consistent as a dystopian narrative, definitely one. I really want to go back and read it using the Slaves of Time.
Using that filter, of course.
Because I believe it's gonna. I'd give it a 1 on that regard.
Sure.
But I think that's really, really interesting.
Actually, to that point, poetry is very much based off of time and
rhythm. Yeah.
I would like to actually, this is way beyond what I'm capable of, but go and look at how it measured each sentence, if it did have that poetry to it. I felt it when I read it that there
felt
was
like it did. I don't know about the actual.
It evokes that sense. I think you're right. I think that's an intentional.
So there might be
choice.
that time frame, that timing to it. So it adds that layer of, you're in a regimented society, and you have that regimented scale that adds to the poetry. And I like to see how that may break down over the story. I like to go back and review it again to see all of that. But nonetheless, Scott?
Sure. So real quickly, in the version I have, the anthology it's collected in, to Chris's point, it says, I'll read you the line, "This story is perhaps reminiscent of Kurt Vonnegut's Harrison Bergeron, and certainly grows out of the whole tradition of revolt against social and political repression in literature, which I think is obvious given that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give it a 1. Of course, it's perfectly tonally consistent. It gets almost slapstick, but that's sort of the whole point. It's, again, the nature, like the machine-like nature of society this has become versus the one person who's trying to fight against it, and the way you can fight against it is by being, causing chaos within it. And I think that brings it. That tone is always present throughout the whole story.
Beth?
I say that yes, the work was totally consistent throughout. In my head, it had sort of created this weird, maybe not so weird, but this gray, like kind of almost Soviet picture of what was happening. And his Harlequin character was like this also kind of Terry Gilliam kind of character who was just absurd and strange and
it's kind of
sort of annoying, but also kind of lovable and fun. And the whole thing, like it definitely created a picture, and I could feel a sort of rhythm that went along with it, and that was throughout the whole story, as short as it was. So yes, it's got a good 1 from me.
Okay, Chris. Was the work effective within its genre and addressed the themes?
Yeah, this is going to get a really strong 1. And I was going to say it very well. As a dystopian narrative, it really is effective in its genre. But I was thinking about what you were saying about it being Soviet and the Gilliam absurdist, and I'm sitting here thinking about the stories that I mentioned, or even the adaptations of the movies, like Logan's Run or Brazil, which is an original script.
Yeah.
That there is this absurdist nature in it, and the Soviet brought me back to it because when you look at stuff like Harrison Bergeron and you look at things like this or some of the stuff that Harlan was writing, there is a very Cold War feel about it. I mean, there is.
I agree with that.
Like with
it's written in
1984.
1965, I think.
Yeah, but that was my whole point, because if you look at like this or 1984 or Harrison Bergeron, which I think was in the 50s, there is an air of Cold War about it. It's like somehow they're applying fascism and communism, like all the ills, consumerism, capitalism. They're taking every ideology's extreme and bringing it to the forefront, which is why you have the absurdist things that are in these different works. So yeah, I'm going to say that on many levels, this is very, very tonally consistent.
Yes, of course, I am going to agree with that. So the genre, by Harlan Ellison's own definition, is speculative fiction. But I think as a subgenre, it falls into dystopia broadly. And to your point, also, in addition to the Harrison Bergeron thing, he also name checks the story itself references 1984, like outright, towards the end. So which of course is probably the most well-known broad dystopia. So yeah, it addresses all those. That's its theme, and then the conflict that's the setup in that, again, man versus itself, almost, like, exactly. I mean, like, and that also lends itself to the absurdist nature of it. Harlequin, yes, is an absurd character, of course, but he needs to be because society has become so, rigid and is now driven by time itself that the extreme contrast between them needs to be there. That is a theme within it, and of course it addresses it effectively. So 1 for me.
Beth?
1 for me as well. It's effective within its genre. It gave me a feeling of being constricted, which is what I feel like the Harlequin felt the whole time. I was just trying to escape, so that's just a 1.
I suppose, to add to what all of you have said before, is that the nature of, in a sense, almost the insidious nature of rebellion, and that even if it fails to change things, it affects those who witness it.
Yes.
To the point where it affects the Ticktockman at the end, which we'll discuss. Actually, this is a good transition to the next section, but I will give it a 1 because I think that for all of the points you guys said, it's very clear cut what its point is. It's Not like the others we discussed tonight, which was Sonny Blues and Nightfall, which you can see different themes.
This one's more obvious, but still, yeah.
But I think it's very effective to what it wants to be. So, Scott, I'm going to go after you to the end. Did it achieve its goals?
Yes, I believe it did, and that's the whole point. The ending is the most, I think, it's the most impactful thing. That's the whole point. The Ticktockman is now late himself. Being late has now become a crime. That's the dystopian society that they live in, and because he had to spend so much resources and energy hunting down the Harlequin, who's disrupting everyone's schedule, such a horrible crime that he's late all the time. I think they read him out your list of crimes. You've been 63 years late or whatever, total in your life. That's more than a lifetime, and the punishment is they turn off I think they have the cardio plates. It's the way they control people. They can stop you from living if you're too late, if you've been late enough, that is to say.
But to be fair, they do torture the Harlequin.
They 1984 him, essentially. And
they say that's exactly how
that's how they got him. And then he goes on, they make him go out in public and say I was wrong. Everyone has to adhere to the rigid time schedule that we all live our lives by. Don't listen to my antics. The state has told me the state is correct. Everyone do what they say. But at the end, the Ticktockman himself is late. And he's subject to the same rules. So that's the whole point. So of course I'm going to give it a 1. Yes, it achieved its goals by the end.
Beth?
I agree. It achieved its goals. So 1.
All right. I disagree with your interpretation from simply a line that the Ticktockman has there where it goes.
Yes, I knew you would love that. That's why I picked this one for you.
And the very fact that he
says mree.
Yeah, that's my.
Yes, I know. It's an inside joke amongst us, but sure, go on.
But honestly, from the very fact that he's flaunting, is not only because he's late because of the actions that happened, but he's late and he doesn't care anymore. That the Harlequin has implanted that rebellious nature. In a sense, what was broken from the Harlequin
is now implanted in him.
In the Ticktockman, who's in a sense more important to have that part break. So I think that's the main theme, that this kind of
I can agree with that.
Enough challenge to authority will start to break down authority itself.
I like that. You're right. That's sort of an interpretation I wouldn't have thought or didn't actually think about till you mentioned it. But you probably get both, and you're saying it's effective either way, right?
Yeah.
Yes, good.
I actually kind of saw that as the fact that it was a contagion, and that the Harlequin man.
You can kill a man, but not an idea.
Yeah, he was kind of broken. So the fact that he was ready to, I guess, confine himself to the schedule, but his, I don't know what you would call it, enthusiasm or his just inability to follow the rigid time schedule was contagious. And the Ticktockman, because he was the one who was trying to break him, it somehow rubbed off on him. And I found that
he was tainted by it.
Yeah, it was just, rebellion is contagious in a way. Even if you break the person who starts it, it's still there. It doesn't go away. So that's...
Sure. And Chris?
I'm definitely rereading the story. I'm giving it a 1 because I'm looking at the ending, and I was thinking that back to what I was saying about the governing body living by a different set of rules, and when it's brought out to him, it's just you're 3 minutes late. He grins sheepishly and says, "That's ridiculous." Remember the Ticktockman behind his mask? "Check your watch." And they went in the office and went, but my thing was just basically to me was, reset your watch. We're on my time. That never happened. So I kind of felt...
It's for itself, yeah.
Yeah, it was... Basically, he was saying, no, I'm right, absolutely, you're wrong. Regardless of what your watch says, my watch is your... Whatever I say it is. Now is the new time.
Yes.
Now is the new time.
Now, what's interesting here is, I think that this is the crutch of the entire point of the story. And I've now seen 3 interpretations of it. Is that an effective ending if your point is obfuscated by multiple interpretations?
Allow me to rebut that. Not rebut, but I think it is, because we just got, as you said, a different interpretation, but nevertheless one we thought was affecting. We thought it was affecting by the end. Whatever goal we thought it was going to achieve,
yes, but
it did.
But is the right interpretation of the interpretation that
the right interpretation
intended.
is the interpretation that I am telling you, of course, but less facetiously. It's if you think it's effective, whatever interpretation you get out of it, if you think it's effective at the end, you have to, you know what I mean? It's a testament to the story itself that you can get these interpretations variously.
Because if the intent of the author is to prove a point,
to prove one single point, maybe
to prove a single point, if you can interpret multiple various,
you're trying to confine the story into a rigid kind of.
See, you're being Ticktockman to the Ticktockman story.
I am the TikTok man here.
I was thinking about all three stories.
Well, check your watch and check your fucking answer. Go ahead.
In this series, I was thinking about all three stories we did: Nightfall, Sonny's Blues, and this. And in each story, we've got a different interpretation. And in each story, the author himself is giving, in Nightfall and in Sonny's Blues, is blatantly giving you multiple sides of multiple stories, saying that every story is much more complex than you may think it is. I think maybe Harlan Ellison didn't do it as overtly as the other two stories, but I think part of the point is that this issue can have three or four different interpretations,
multiple choice
because all are happening at once. Nothing lives inside a vacuum. Yet he's still maintaining like my time is your time. It's just like my 3 minutes late is now the correct time. Deal with it. But the fact that he's 3 minutes late deals into your interpretation. They all feed into one another. I don't really see them as any of them as separate.
But I established earlier that I felt that of all the stories you read tonight, this one was the most with a clear-cut message, with an intention of.
And now you're saying it might not be.
And I think that from the very fact that since it did have the most clear-cut intention, and the fact that it's obfuscated, I'm going back and changing my. Was it effective with its themes? I'm giving it a 0 because I feel that it had an intended purpose and one not to be. Again, you're saying that I'm defined, but I think the author's intent matters.
Fair enough.
And if it's meant to be a definitive message, and look at religion when that happens.
Maybe, all right.
So
I'm going to go. But if it's meant to be open to interpretation,
but I don't think it was meant to be open for interpretation. Okay. And that's the big.
I see what you're saying. So I'm going to add one quick thing. So when I first read the story years ago, the final line when he goes, I took it as he knows the Ticktockman is going to be. He has to be replaced. He has to be turned off because or at least his 3 minutes are now against him. Mm-hmm. But as we just said, that's one possible interpretation. Now we just got others out of it. So regardless, I'm not changing my answer. I'm just saying I'm just slapping down another possible interpretation that I originally got out of it. That, again, without outright asking Harlan himself what his intent was, or what he meant the ending to imply, I still think it's an effective ending, though.
I'm going to say it's an effective ending if you want to see
whatever goal
it is. But it's not effective in its themes because you can... interpret where I don't think interpretation was intended.
May necessarily apply. All right.
So that is my rationale there.
Yeah.
I've switched it to a 0.
Fair enough.
So,
let's move on.
All right. Beth, we're on to you for characters. Was the antagonist effective?
I was hoping not to be the first one on this question.
Too bad Ticktockman says he must answer.
Is Ticktockman the antagonist here? If so, yes, he was effective. I've never quite gotten a grasp on what I think the Ticktockman is.
I think that's just real quick. I think that's a point of the story. Like, he's not supposed to be fully explained.
Right, but in my head, I guess, like, I have this clear vision in my head of what this story looks like, and I'm not sure where it's coming from. If it's coming from a movie I saw that I just don't remember, or some picture I don't. But it's very clear, and in my head, he started off as a kind of clockwork. Figure, like not an actual even man.
It's interesting.
I mean, just the fact that he's called the Ticktockman makes him memorable.
But not to his face.
But not to his face. It's true. But
it's sort of derogatory term.
Right, and the rhythm of the story and everything, you just get the feeling that there's like kind of a metronome happening whenever he's around, and it's just so I find him effective. I don't feel like I have a really grasp on him. And that's fine if I'm not supposed to. I don't feel like that's a lack. I just...
Even if not, you're saying
he's effective, yes.
So it's a 1?
So it's a 1. I would have liked to have gone last on this question, but yes.
I feel because even with hearing your hesitance with giving a choice, I have the same thing. I'm interested. I wonder why it was chosen that he was masked. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I like
left
to think,
open, yeah.
But I don't have any even real grasp of interpretation on why he's. I understand why the Harlequin's dressed in motley as he is, but is he supposed to represent the facelessness of the greater society that want in the face of order? I kind of felt, in a sense, like it's almost the judicial system.
Yeah.
Instead of being blind, it's faceless. Yeah. So I don't know. I think he is, in a sense, effective for being an unknown, being this kind of boogeyman, as it were, in
that's essentially
society.
what it is. I agree with that.
Because you can't argue with him. You can't argue.
You can try, but
I
you're not
was
going to
late
win.
for this reason, but it's never going to get.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, you're late. That's the crime. For whatever. Yeah, agreed. Go ahead.
So I think he's effective for that very reason. So I'm going to give it a 1. Chris?
I'm definitely giving it a 1. And I was thinking about everything you said. Both of you, when you, I keep coming back to this, but you can't get away from that. This is dystopian, speculative fiction, and in most of these things, whether it's Big Brother or the handicapper general in Harrison Bergeron, you've got these faces that are faceless. They could be anybody. You know, and then back to Harrison Bergeron, or back to like Hunger Games, we have President Snow, or you have Diana. It's just like, these people are definitely above the law. So, and there's never any in the book, in the story of Harrison Bergeron, while there is a definite picture of President Snow, you do have faces for these people. So, I mean, when you talk about dystopian stuff, it's always a contradiction, because the antagonist is always this greater force that's out there. It could be faceless, it could have a face, but the ideology that's behind it is whatever face they're showing you, whether it's an actual face or whether it's just the face that they pop up that they choose to show you. The antagonist is always there, and but never quite there. It's an interesting dichotomy. I'm definitely giving it a 1, and I'm just saying that it really falls in line with the whole genre.
Right. Well, let me give you guys the real and correct answer, of course. The right answer is the answer I'm about to tell you. This goes back to something we were saying in the earlier ones, the other 2 stories. Yes, Ticktockman is, again, on the surface, the antagonist. He is in the story, but the real antagonist is either time itself, or, more specifically, society's push to become conformist and slaves. So, as I said earlier, instead of time serving man now serves time. I think that's an outright line. It is an outright line in the story.
I would disagree with that concept of time being the villain, because time is some.
It's a nebulous concept. I understand that, but but like I said, it's society's
I would say that
use
society's use of it. So you can't say specifically that time is the villain.
As I said, it's a subset of it, right? Largely, but not quite. Not just time in quotes. Man's interaction with it and becoming slaves to it. In fact, basing society around it now, like an artificial concept, really, almost, or at least artificial use of it. But now, it's a crime to if you're late, if you're 20 minutes late, then fuck you. That's what. And to Chris's point, it's a dystopia, and they can now use it as a weapon against you to murder you, to remove you from society. So I'm giving it a 1, of course, if that's the antagonist to me.
And one thing there, I was looking back in the story, and they were talking about the Office of the Master Timekeeper, that there's actually government positions to support this ideology. Whether they're true, who's populating them in all these stories, it doesn't matter. That it's whether time is the real enemy, I don't know, but it's definitely the thing they grabbed onto to use as a weapon, and created a government around it. Yeah, so I'm seeing your point on that.
But it seemed in when he let the $150,000 worth of jelly beans fly, and the slide walk, is that the first time that was ever used?
I'm not sure, but it's an early use of it, I would say, yeah.
Because that was just amazing. I love that, because you understand what it is immediately. There's no question of what
it's a sci-fi
what he's
element,
about.
yeah, sure.
So the people who were affected, even though they were falling down and tripping over these things and everyone was late, they all were seeming to have fun.
Yeah,
it wasn't like the general populace were really slaves. Like they weren't. They kind of followed out of complacency.
Right.
Like this is just the way things are.
Because that's what the state tells you to do.
But we can still enjoy this. So you wonder how this started. Like everyone just kind of let it happen because no one was willing to say, no, this is ridiculous.
Yes, it's an insidious kind of thing. Like, yeah, sure, like, oh, okay, all right. This isn't line for it. I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like, okay, it got increasingly, like, they kept upping the ante. Like, okay, you're telling me it's like, like, oh, sorry, the interview, you missed it, so whatever. So now, as I said, it's become a state crime essentially, and that's how they control people with it. And it's to your point, real quickly. Like, I think that's what this will come into the answer in the next couple of questions. But yeah, people were having fun, and there definitely is a line that points out that Harlequin always made sure nobody was going to get seriously hurt. It was all in good fun, if you will, and to remind people that life is still there to be lived.
Yes, but except they docked people literally life points.
Yes.
If they were late an hour, they lost an hour of their life.
That's true, but let me just read one thing.
No one
quickly.
seemed all that mad about it. Everyone sort of
because it was sort of like it was sort of like them waking out of a daze of their grind.
The price was worth the experience.
Yes, exactly. And let me just read to your point. You said something earlier, and I want to read you like this is one of the last lines. It's about the revolution. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And in every revolution, a few die who shouldn't, but they have to, because that's the way it happens. And if you make only little change, then it seems to be worthwhile. So, like, to the point, like, only little change, that is to say, the Ticktockman, like, the insidiousness, or, like, not even that, just the rubbing off, Harlequin's mindset rubbing off on him, even though Harlequin himself has been eradicated. Go on.
I'm trying to remember who actually said it, if it was a character in the story, if it was the author. But they're like, he dropped $150,000 worth of jelly beans, blah, 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 blah. Where he got $150,000 worth of jelly beans.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody stopped making jelly beans.
Yeah, 100 years before,
it's another world-building dystopian detail. Yeah,
it's just, and I guess we'll get to it later, but it's definitely one of those things that I'll hold off until it comes up again. Just remind me of the jelly beans.
All right, so we're going to talk about the protagonist now. At the start. Right off the bat, I'm going to give this a soft 0, but I'm going to let others
I'll convince you of the right answer, of course, as always.
Yes, I'm willing, because I feel that the main character is not as important as the idea of him and the ideas he represents, the themes he represents. So in the sense, I have to give like what he represents more credence than the actual character himself. But if we're talking about if the protagonist is interesting, he wasn't. I'm guessing the protagonist would be the Harlequin.
Yes. On the surface again.
And I think that you get more of a concept of who the Ticktockman is, even though he's masked. And I'm not sure I know precisely whether he's an effective protagonist or not. So I'm going to have to...
a wavering
I'm going to give
quantum
him
mechanical...
a 0 right now, but if anyone convinces me otherwise,
right,
I will give it a 1. So basically I am deferring to Chris now.
For now, go ahead.
To see what he thinks about the Harlequin.
I'm going to check. Because I'm going to give it a soft 0. I want to hear. I'm deferring it because.
All right, you guys are undecided. All right.
No, because
for now or 0.
Ian actually said exactly what I was going to say about why I would give it a soft 0. But I'm open to changing that.
All right. Well, I'll do it right now for you. Yes, as you said, Harlequin is the protagonist in quotes on the surface, sure, but in the same way that the enemy or the major antagonist is, becoming a slave to society's drive for time. You just said something, and I'll give you your own words back to you, and to prove to you why you should give it a 1. He represents the ideas he represents. Like that's the actual that's the protagonist. Like the struggle, like humanity's spirit to not to be crushed by the machine that it can turn itself into. So if you take that somewhat as the protagonist, and he embodies that spirit. Yes, he may be like himself as an actual character. I still think it's a 1 both ways, like on both layers. But even if you don't like him, the Harlequin himself as one, he gets fleshed out. He has a little backstory. He has a wife even. She's always yelling at him that he's always late. That's his whole point. But regardless, he represents, like I just said, the change, the little gear that might change, that represents a revolution that may actually make a difference, even though if he gets crushed by it, he might throw off the other cogs in the machine of society and the dystopian, world they live in as a greater whole. So perhaps that may convince you. I'm giving it a 1, of course, but think about it that way and see what you think. I'll give it to Beth now.
I feel like the Harlequin, if you take him out of the story somehow, maybe he's not that effective as a character. Like, he has kind of a background. He has a wife, but it's sort of weird because you wonder how they got together in the first place, because she seems not to like him at all. But I sort of saw the story itself. I know the Harlequin is not the narrator, but the language of the story, the way that some of the sentences just go on and don't have, like when he's describing the jelly beans, he's like purple, orange, green, and then he starts describing the flavor as opposed to the color, and it's just, there's not really the punctuation you expect, and there's not, it just kind of goes on, and it's just disregarding time completely. The way the story's set up, like, okay, we're starting in the middle, then we're going to go to the beginning, then you get the end, so it's, the story itself is disregarding time.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like, time in this world is the law, we're not following that law from the very get-go. So I feel like the Harlequin is represented by the story itself. So he's more than just the protagonist, he is the actual scaffolding,
maybe.
like the words and the way it fits together. So I will give it a 1 as a whole for the protagonist.
Okay.
So you're saying the Harlequin is the personification of the whole story, or the intent?
Yeah.
Like, even though
the driving force.
Yeah, that's more or less
even though
what I got
he's more spoken of and about than actually appearing himself in the story, the fact that in a way the narration is going from his point of view.
But he still affects things like the jelly bean thing, and even like when he shows up. Actually, you remember this? He announces. He taunts them. He's like, I'm going to show up at 8 o'clock. And they're all like, oh, he's going to be late. And he shows up half an hour early or whatever, early. Yeah. So they all get like fucked up by their own like mechanisms that are trying to catch him
because he just doesn't follow the rules of time. It doesn't matter whether he's late or early. He just doesn't follow the rule. He's like a representative.
He's screwing with the world. Yeah.
The revolution, I guess,
exactly,
or rebellion. He's not necessarily an individual, maybe, that matters so much.
It's the Batman thing, kind of. Yeah. Go on.
I'm going to change. I was convinced by Beth, but more so, I remember the discussion between the Ticktockman and the Harlequin when they have the cyclical conversation,
1984 style, yeah,
hilariously in keeping with the entire thing of time, and the very fact that he's defiant to the end until he's broken. But nonetheless, he is the driving force. You're correct. He is what sets everything in motion. And although he perhaps is not as developed as I would like him for a short story, he serves his purpose. And so I'm going to give it a 1. Chris, have you changed your mind, or are you keeping it at...
I have indeed, actually. No, because it is...
Right, dead. Go on.
I mean, because it's really funny because I don't see him so much as a protagonist, as a catalyst. But a good protagonist is there to show you the world, and by being a catalyst, he did show the world. He did succeed as a protagonist. So yeah, it's getting a 1.
Okay. So Chris, back to you now. Supporting cast, go on.
I'm going to give this 1 because by your own law, if there's one person that stands out, and that is his ex-wife. But also, as Beth reminded me
of... I think she's his actual wife. I think she's still his wife.
Oh, yeah. I mean, is it... Well, yeah, by the end.
I'm sure after she turned him in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they got 1984. That's the whole point.
Marriage was over. Yeah, but his wife, and then as Beth pointed out with the... we were all talking about the jelly beans, that Beth was saying that this is the moment in their life, even though they're going to get docked 7 minutes or whatever, they were actually enjoying themselves for whatever period of time. You include those characters because, as in Sonny's Blues, those characters actually contribute to the mirror of the society. I'm definitely giving it a 1. Those textures were great.
Of course, I'm going to give it a 1. Basically, for all the you basically laid it out just there, so I won't have much more to add. It's because of that, because the way he fleshed it out and built it up. Like maybe the crowds can get the represent the common man as represented in the story, and his attempts to change them, and they were affected by his actions. Yeah, and it changed. So therefore, I also will give it a 1, and I'm done with that. And that's all I have to say.
I'm giving it a 1 also, not necessarily for the wife, but more for the crowds, like Scott, like you just said. Just their reaction to everything, the disruption that they kind of seem to enjoy, maybe not participate in actively, but it was nice to see the world from their kind of perspective, as limited as that was.
Almost like society itself is a fucking supporting character in a dystopia, so,
I may seem like a curmudgeon here, but I have to give this a 0.
You don't seem like one, you just are.
Yes.
Go on.
First of all, I thought the ex-wife, or the wife, was...
Alice, I think, is
completely one-dimensional.
I agree with that.
She was. And, like, I understand her necessity to the betrayal angle, but to say she's a good character is betraying every other good character ever written in literature.
All right, take it easy.
But also, like, yes, the crowds are fun and all of that kind of stuff. To see the jelly beans rain down on them, but the world wasn't built up to be interesting. I can't name, aside from Alice, there's not one other supporting character in the entire thing, and it's
the Ticktockman's minions.
But again, they're not named. They're like,
I'm just busting you.
The world exists, but it's a story about the Ticktockman versus the Harlequin, and those are the two main focuses, and everything else is
sort of by the wayside.
Not only secondary but tertiary. So, like, the world's developed enough to provide a platform or a stage for them to play upon, but it isn't enough for it to be a world of its own. So I have to give it a 0 for that.
Actually, I don't even disagree with you. I just kind of feel like, as short as the story is, and as much as the focus is on those two characters, I kind of feel like the supporting characters don't matter so much. So,
but if
guess that's
not the point,
but
then sure.
Should you give it a 1 or should you give it a 0? Should you that's the question.
I'm not switching my answer to 0, but it's not a strong.
Allow me
1.
to quickly say, like, were they effective? They were for the part that they played. Like, by that scale, that's more or less why I'm giving.
But I don't think they were necessarily effective as narrative. They just, in a sense, were.
But they weren't ineffective.
Scenery.
Is all. Right, go ahead.
But that's the point, though, because we looked at Sonny's Blues, and we talked about the revivalists and the audience that was watching them, and the story of his mom. Yeah, that was a longer story. He had more time to develop them, but it was more of a superficial development. And if you take a story this length in the manner in which it was written, those supporting characters did exactly what they needed to do in this condensed version.
But Sonny, again, you're dealing with not only length, but Sonny's Blues developed that world a lot more. And again, I guess this is a matter of the subjective, what you consider to be effective narrative or not. And you say you're saying function over, in a sense, a fleshed out world. I'm saying it's a skeletal scaffolding that offers nothing. And what could have been if the scaffolding was torn down and you saw what the building was afterwards, but it's still that skeletal structure, and it tarnishes what might have been later on as a narrative.
And in Sonny's Blues, at least there were individual characters that could stand out, that were supporting characters. In this one, it was basically a mob.
Right, but to me, it's a matter of perspective. If you're looking at, I used the analogy before of the Twilight Zone. So, like, where Nightfall would have been maybe a half-hour story expanded to an hour, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that in terms of the way the pacing was. Not saying that the story wasn't intriguing. This would be more of a what you would consider a 15-minute Twilight Zone done in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
In other words, they gave you what you needed to know. They gave you the story of this world, but didn't have to go into so much detail. Whereas, like, something like Nightfall or Sonny's Blues, they took, for whatever reason, whatever it took to tell that story to make their point, whether it took 17 pages or 30 pages or in this case 11 pages, everybody dealt with the story they had to deal with in their time.
All right, since we're going to get, or at least I'm going to get brutal here, we're going to move on to Scott, dialogue, effective or not?
Yes, I'm giving it a 1. And actually you brought up sort of the centerpiece maybe, or like the example I can point to the most when Harlequin gets caught and is being interviewed / tortured somewhat by the Ticktockman, and their exchange, as you said, is like the entire like conversation becomes cyclical, which of course filters into the actual point and theme of the story itself. And yeah, it's humorous, but also sort of like, you know, dark. Like he's being brainwashed, or that's what they're attempting to do to him, or explain to him why he doesn't, you know, you have to be removed from society because you don't fit in. And he's explaining why, you know, you're enforcing an arbitrary rule upon society and making people's lives more miserable. So for all that, for just for that example, and everything else is perfectly fine. There's nothing stilting about it. Maybe like you could say 1 or 2 like references or slang is a sign of the times, but it's still perfectly fine. It's not, you know, doesn't take anything away from it. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Beth?
This one I'm sort of conflicted about because the dialogue, it served its purpose. Nothing stands out that I would say is memorable. I don't remember what anyone said specifically. It seemed more a part of the language of the story than actual what the characters would say. Like it didn't seem to be individualized for each character, but more just to go along with the basic feel of the language of the story. So
it serves the story, but is it itself? You know, I get you're getting at.
I'm going to give this a 0. But there's no such thing as a soft 0.
Yeah, there is.
So okay, so I'll give it a soft.
A reluctant 0.
A reluctant 0.
Good.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, I agree with Beth on her interpretation. But I do distinctly remember the conversation of the Ticktockman versus the Harlequin at the end of the story. And it's a short story.
A very short story.
Very short story. So I think that was very effective for what they were trying to do. The rest of the dialogue was serviceable, but I'm going to give this a 1 for the overall kind of
effect of it. Yeah.
Poetics of it.
You're making me the bad guy.
Of course. I'm not taking the whole fall. And Chris?
This would kind of be a 0.5 in the positive, but since since we're doing a binary, I'm gonna give it a soft 1, only because the dialogue served its purpose, but the reason it actually gets a 1 for me is 2 reasons. Number 1, the last bit of dialogue, where he says, you know, you're 3 minutes late, and the Ticktockman says, no, check your clock. To me, that justifies giving it a 1, even if I don't remember distinctly what everybody else says. But there was one part in the interrogation that made me laugh, and I just found it now, where the Ticktockman, in his old, you know, in like an authoritarian would,
in the Ministry of Time
and circumstance, would say, "Repent, Harlequin." And Harlequin said, "Get stuffed." I mean, that just shows the dichotomy. I mean, it's. I've pointed out 4 lines in an 11-page story, but to me, those 4 lines say so much. If those are the only 4 lines I remember, then so be it.
All right,
it gets 1.
Okay, now Beth, was your immersion ever broken while reading the story?
No, it wasn't. I would just give that a 1. I don't even need to really discuss it.
Yeah. It's a very short story. It keeps its tone throughout. I have to give it a 1. I can't say anything against it. Chris?
As with, I think the other stories we talked about tonight, when my immersion was broken, once with the jelly beans, and once with the get stuffed, it was a breaking of immersion that was kind of like a refresher that kind of propelled you to the next point, that made a point, that the point of this was to kind of like say, here's this landscape, let me just show you this ripple in it, for whatever purpose. And we read 3 stories tonight that were all excellent, and the immersion things that broke it out only added to the story. So I'm going to give this a 1.
So I'm going to give it a 1 too. What I'm going to say is it's sort of hard for your immersion to be broken, as you just said, because of the it's because it's just a shorter story, like a quite condensed story. But like everything that's happening is supposed to be ridiculous. That's sort of the whole point. Like the jelly bean thing, it's over the top in like an absurd way, but that's the whole point, like a major point of it. So no, I'm giving it a 1. My immersion was not broken. I accepted everything because the themes it's trying to address, like use those as a vehicle to address them.
Okay. Now we're on to the final question. Overall, was the work enjoyable, and is it recommended? This is an interesting question here. Because I did enjoy reading it. I might have been harsh in critiquing it, but it was a good read. Mm. But would I recommend it? And this is tough for me because I think that if you want to read a story with the same points that's better, you can.
I agree with that, but go on.
Yeah.
And I don't think that if someone asked me, hey, I have a I want to read something, what would you recommend? This would ever crop up as something I would pick before another work. Like if it appeared in a compilation of Harlan Ellison short stories,
as it does,
it's worth the read. But if you said like hey, and what's something I would give 1,000 things. So I have to give it in a sense a 0 on that end. That I wouldn't ever say, hey, this is mandatory reading. So Chris.
I'm keeping my nice guy status. I'm going to give it a 1 because I did enjoy it immensely, and I'm going to recommend it with the same caveat. If somebody's going to say, I want to know Dystopia, I'd be like, read a 5-page Harrison Bergeron, or play a piano, or The Hunger Games, or watch Logan's Run. The book is boring. Watch Logan's Run. Watch Brazil. But once we are in that subject and say, hey, or I'm a fan of Vonnegut, or I'm a fan of Philip K. Dick, or I'm a fan of Asimov, Harlan Ellison is not always an easy read. Like Asimov, he's a good read, but he can be a very dry read. I was going to say Vonnegut, I keep coming back to him because to me, it's like, I'm sorry, Harlan, but he's kind of Ellison with a little more personality. And, but so in an esoteric way, I would definitely recommend it. I would not recommend it to like the masses. But then again, I can't really recommend any of these books to the masses because I think each one of these appeals to a love of a narrative. And I'm not saying a genre. I'm saying love of a narrative.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm giving it a 1.
Mm-hmm.
I of course have to give it a 1 because I did recommend it to all of you, but I would do that anyways. And to your point, E, I see what you mean. Would it be my top choice? Maybe not, but I still, if someone said I want to read a good piece of dystopian fiction, but I don't want to read 1984 again or something like that, or like other recognizable ones. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to read Brave New World. I've already read Brave New World. There's anything else like it? And to your point, also, Chris, like you sort of like. You need somewhat of a vague background to maybe want to read something like this or get an appreciation of it. But regardless, I think that the themes it addresses, again, like the message it has, is almost timeless, if you will. Like, not ironically, but...
May I make a point? You added a ton of qualifiers to your recommendation.
That's true, but I'll give you...
You're right about that. I haven't read... I read 1984, I read...
You're right.
What was that one you said?
You're calling me out Brave New World. You're calling me out on it, but I'll go one step further that I'll still recommend it because it opens with a quote from Thoreau, so at least you get a Thoreau quote.
Yeah.
And
by no means I not enjoy it.
Right.
I'm just saying that like it's not something that I would.
I fully understand what you just spoke to, but even so, even without those qualifiers, yes, I would recommend it, and of course I enjoyed it, and I think it's impactful enough in a short enough time that you can extract something meaningful from it.
And I want to make one point that Scott brought up. And the reason that, like, if people ask me about what dystopian literature, what dystopian movies, because it is to me the assumption that we've all read 1984 and or A Brave New World in sometime in junior high or high school. So to me, those things would be like given in the world, or something like Animal Farm, but something like a Vonnegut or an Ellison or an Asimov you wouldn't necessarily read. So if you're gonna, so then if you're interested in like 1984 or Brave New World, that's gonna propel you into a certain style. So yeah, I would recommend it, but it's like anything else. It's a subjective recommend, but I did enjoy it and I would recommend it. So those to me meet the criteria.
Yeah.
I also enjoyed it and would recommend it with the same sort of caveats that Chris and Scott, you both have been saying, and also you, Ian. It's sort of a playful variation of dystopia. It's not so dark. It's not so extensive, just because it's so short, and it's just. It would be. I haven't read enough Ellison to say that this is, if there was something to read by him, would be it. So I can't say that.
I can certainly give you others, but I get your point. Go on.
So I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. Maybe not as like your first foray into the theme, but it was certainly enjoyable. So I have no hesitation to give it a 1. It's maybe not my strongest 1, but it's still a 1.
Okay. So in totality, nice guy Chris Morgan gave his third 10 of the evening, and so did Scott. Beth gave it a 9, and grumpy old
grumpy old TikTok Ian
gave it a 7, which I agree with. I thought it was, in a sense, an average work, and I wasn't like, I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't astounded. So overall, it's a 9. So if you're into dystopia, check it out. If you're looking for something interesting to read, check it out. It's a quick read. And I would recommend Shel Silverstein before you read it. So Jonathan Ebenezer here with Scott Thurlow.
Make sure you count seconds of your own lives.
Beth Morgan.
Good night.
And Christopher Morgan.
Good night.
And we'll see you next time on Lots to Do About Nothing.
Lots to do about nothing. Lots to do about nothing.
Music and editing by Chris Morgan.
Lots to Do About Nothing.
This has been a Lost Signals production. All rights reserved.